I'm Nate, 38, and the last words I heard before they drove off were, "Let's see if he can survive on his own." 5 minutes. That's all it took for my family to disappear at a gas station off Highway 65. Not a call, not a message. Just the cold wind, the smell of fries, and silence that cut deeper than winter air. A rusted pickup slowed beside me, and an old man asked, "You ride quiet, or you talk?" If you've ever been left behind and kept walking anyway, I'd love to know where you're listening from. The wind whipped through my jacket, slicing cold and clean, like it had something to prove. I zipped it up higher, stuffing my hands in my pockets and trying to breathe past the bite in the air. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I turned in a slow circle. The parking lot was empty. Eerily so. The family SUV was gone. Just gone. There'd been no goodbye, no warning. Only the fading echo of the door slamming behind me and the crumpled fast food bag that now flapped weakly near the trash can like some forgotten flag. The gas station nearby was boarded up for renovations, paint peeling, windows covered in brown paper. There wasn't a soul in sight. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Figures. I took 2 steps toward the road, then stopped. Tried the phone again, waving it like a stubborn wand. Nothing. I turned on the flashlight, more out of habit than need, and looked down the highway. Nothing but mountain curves and low mist. The air smelled like pine and old diesel. And then, a ding. 1 bar of signal. 1 text. Travis. Let's see if he can survive on his own now. I read it 3 times, numbness spreading from my fingers straight to my spine. Not a joke, not a mistake. They meant to leave me here. I sat down on the cold bench under the rest stop awning, the slats pressing into my back, and just stared. Cars passed in the distance, headlights blinking in and out between trees. But none slowed, none turned in. No missed calls, no messages. Just that one. Just Travis, always the first to throw a punch. Only now he'd used a text. For a while, I couldn't think. I just sat there like a kid on the first day of school, lunchbox in hand, waiting for someone to call my name. Then I remembered. I was 6, maybe 7. Miss Jenkins had sent all the other kids home and stayed with me on the curb, coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. "They probably just got caught in traffic," she'd said. They didn't. Eventually, she left too. That was the first time. This was just the next. I stood up slowly, rubbing my palms together for warmth. I didn't yell, didn't scream. There was no point. Somewhere deep down, part of me had expected this. Not here, not like this, but I'd seen the signs. It was easier to leave me behind than admit they never really saw me in the first place. I turned toward the road, squinting down the curve. The air was getting colder, darker, the sun giving up behind the mountains. I had no coat, no cash, and no clue where the next town was. But I wasn't going to call them, not now, not ever, if I could help it. They wanted to see if I could survive? Fine. Let's see. I started walking, my boots echoing louder than they should have. The road curved ahead, silent and wide. I had no plan, just legs, and a strange, pulsing need not to be pathetic. Each step felt like resistance, not against them, against what they thought I was. Just before the turn, I heard it, a low hum, tires on asphalt, headlights, 1 pair, slowing. I stepped to the side of the road, heart suddenly beating so hard I could feel it in my ears. The light grew closer. White glare, warm and blinding. Were they coming back? Or was this something else entirely? My fingers curled into fists at my sides. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be them or not. And just as the vehicle began to round the bend, for a fleeting second, I remembered the look on Travis's face last Thanksgiving. The smirk. The way he said I was too soft to make it outside the family. My jaw clenched, no matter who it was. I wouldn't beg. Not this time. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first thing I'd ever truly decided for myself. The truck made more noise than it should have for its speed. Slow, deliberate, like it had nothing to prove. A rusted front bumper, one headlight dimmer than the other. I stepped back off the shoulder, boots crunching gravel as it rolled to a stop. The window squeaked down. "Need a lift, son?" His voice was southern, sure, but not syrupy. There was something steady in it, almost like a dare. The man behind the wheel looked to be in his 60s, weathered in a way that didn't ask for pity, just acknowledgement. Flannel shirt, worn ball cap, and a look that said he'd seen worse than me standing by a road at sundown. I hesitated. He looked me over once, then added, "You can get in, but you don't ride quiet. You talk, or you walk." That pulled something out of me I didn't expect, a short breath that might have been a laugh. I nodded once and climbed in. The seat groaned beneath me. The heater blew lukewarm air that smelled faintly of tobacco and something like motor oil. We pulled onto the highway, the lights casting long, tired shadows across the asphalt. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nate." "Jed," he said. "Fox Hollow." "Where's that?" "Other side of nowhere, but it's got pie and a post office, so we survive." I looked out the window. "That good enough?" "Depends who's asking." I didn't say anything. After a minute, he added, "Your people leave you?" I exhaled through my nose, slow. "Apparently they wanted to see if I'd survive. You ever hear anything dumber than that?" Jed made a sound that sat somewhere between a grunt and a chuckle. "Yeah, once. That fella married his cousin." I smiled, in spite of myself. We rode in silence for a while, but not the heavy kind. More like we both agreed not to fill the cab with anything unnecessary. Trees blurred past, then fields, then a gas station that looked closed even when open. The road narrowed. I'd never been this far outside familiarity. "Fox Hollow's small," Jed said. "People say hi. They mean it." I nodded, not sure what to say. He pulled into a gravel lot beside a hardware store. The paint on the sign was peeling, but the windows were clean. Light spilled from behind thick curtains inside. There was a little bench outside, carved initials in the wood. "You hungry?" "No," I lied. "Thought so." He didn't push. He unlocked a side door and led me through the back room, past shelves of nails, dusty jars of screws, and a faint smell of old wood and oil. "This used to be a feed store," he said. "Now it's tools and parts. I run it, sort of. Sleep upstairs." He opened a small side room, bare except for a couch, a folded quilt, and an old radio on the windowsill. "You can crash here tonight. Couch is lumpy, but it won't bite." I looked at him, surprised by the offer. "You sure?" He shrugged. "Ain't no one using it but cobwebs." I nodded. "Thanks." He hesitated in the doorway, then said, "This town don't care where you're from, but it'll damn sure notice what you do next." He placed a thermos on the table. "Black coffee, don't argue." Then he left. I stood there a moment, letting the silence settle. The place smelled like time, not dust or mold, just the kind of stillness that came from being useful long enough to be forgotten. I sat down on the couch. The cushions let out a tired sigh. The quilt was heavier than it looked, patched in a way that suggested someone had cared enough to fix what tore instead of throwing it out. That felt strange. Good strange. No one had asked me for anything. No one had brought up potential or mistakes, or you could have been something. Just a room, a place to be. Why did that make my throat tight? I looked up at the ceiling, then closed my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't haunted by voices. Not theirs, anyway. No Travis reminding me I never quite measured up. No sideways compliments from my mother about how some people just aren't built for leadership. No echoing silence from my father, just the tick of the old radio dial. My eyes scanned the wall across from the couch. Faded flyers, mostly. Community yard sale, dog missing, prayer breakfast. Then one caught my eye. Help wanted. Bellamy Books, inquire within. I stared at it like it had spoken. The paper was worn, corners curled, taped in place with care. Bellamy Books. I didn't know what it was, but it sounded peaceful, maybe old, maybe quiet. Something about it felt like a sign. Maybe it was just the exhaustion. Or maybe it was the coffee, still warm in the thermos beside me. But I couldn't look away from that flyer. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. But maybe, just maybe, I was already doing it. The bell over the door jingled with a kind of tired charm as I stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of old pages and vanilla candle wax, an oddly comforting combination. Dust motes floated in shafts of light coming through tall front windows, landing softly on the wooden floor like ash in reverse. I hadn't even crossed the threshold fully before a voice called out from somewhere behind a stack of hardcovers. "You lost?" It wasn't unkind, just blunt. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on a faded apron that read, "Readers make terrible customers. They never leave." She had silver-streaked hair tied back in a loose knot, sharp eyes that scanned me like a barcode, and the kind of presence that made you want to sit up straighter, even if you weren't slouching. "I'm looking about the job," I said, gesturing toward the faded flyer from the night before, which I'd torn carefully from Jed's wall this morning. "You don't know books, do you?" she asked, already walking behind the counter. "I know being broke. Does that count?" She paused, then barked out something that could have been a laugh. "Honesty over experience. You'll do." She waved a hand toward the front room. "That's fiction. Biographies near the stairs. Nothing's alphabetized, on purpose. If someone's meant to find a book, they will." I nodded like I understood. She watched me for a beat, then softened. "Nora Bellamy. Been running this place since '83. Owned it even longer. You got a name?" "Nate. Just Nate. For now?" She gave a short nod, accepting the half-answer. "You've got hands that haven't seen hard labor," she said, eyeing my palms. "But you carry yourself like someone who's been carrying someone else's weight a long time." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. Instead, I asked, "So, the job?" She raised a brow. "Shelving, cleaning, helping customers when they actually exist. It's part-time, part cash. No benefits but tea, sarcasm, and occasional wisdom." "Sounds like a promotion," she smirked. "You'll start tomorrow. Unless you plan on sleeping under the poetry shelf tonight, you'll need a room." My eyebrows went up. "There's a room." "Upstairs, it's dusty and old, like most good things. Comes with a key, a view of the courthouse, and a very judgmental cat I haven't seen in weeks." "You sure?" She leaned forward slightly. "I trust the gut, not the resume." And just like that, it was mine. No forms, no references, no interrogation, just trust. I followed her up the narrow staircase at the back of the shop, creaking wood beneath every step. The hallway smelled of lavender and forgotten things. The room was small but clean. Wide window, battered dresser, and a bed that looked softer than any I'd slept on in years. "The bathroom's down the hall. Don't flush anything that isn't supposed to be flushed. I won't explain what that means." I nodded, still absorbing. She hesitated before turning to go. Every root starts somewhere dark. The trick is knowing which direction to grow. She left before I could respond. The door clicked softly behind her, and I was alone. For a while, I just stood there, letting it sink in. This wasn't a borrowed room from family. Wasn't a favor I'd owe. It was mine. Given, not negotiated. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress let out a tired breath, like it had been waiting too. I looked around. Walls painted the color of late afternoon. Scuff marks where pictures used to hang. A small nightstand with a cracked lamp. Curious, I opened the drawer. Inside, folded once and curled at the edges, was a letter, half burned, the bottom corner blackened and crumbling. The envelope read, "To the son I failed." I froze. It wasn't addressed to me, of course, but my fingers shook as I held it, as if it might crumble further just from being touched. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some things need silence before they're read. I placed it back inside the drawer, closed it gently. Then I lay back, staring at the ceiling fan blades, unmoving. The bookstore creaked beneath me, like it was stretching its bones after a long nap. Somewhere, faintly, I could hear the hum of traffic and the turning of a page downstairs. She didn't ask where I came from. She didn't ask why I needed a job or if I'd been in trouble. She offered me a key. And it terrified me more than being left on the side of a highway ever did. Trust, pure and simple, with no strings, felt heavier than shame. But it also felt like air. I wasn't sure if I was growing yet. But for the first time, I wasn't buried. The morning started like any other. Dust hung in the bookstore air like a quiet reminder of time passing. I opened the front blinds, flipped the closed sign to open, and let the light fall across the spines of books that hadn't moved in years. Outside, fog clung low to the sidewalk, curling around the wrought iron lamppost like an old friend reluctant to leave. It was my birthday. Not that I expected anything. No party, no gifts, just maybe a text, a note, even a hey from someone who remembered the day I showed up in the world. But there was nothing. Not from Travis, not from anyone else, not even from my mother. The silence was colder than the air outside. I made myself useful. Rearranged the display table near the front, swapped out gardening guides for cozy mysteries. Nora always said the latter sold better when the weather turned. She showed up around 10, arms full of brown paper bags and her usual no-nonsense energy. I moved to help, and she waved me off. "Don't hover. Makes you look needy." I stepped back, hands up. She pulled out a small pie tin and set it on the counter. Steam curled from the crust. "Apple. Homemade. Not from scratch. I'm not a martyr, but close enough." I stared at it. She caught my hesitation. "What?" I shook my head. "Just didn't expect anything." Nora squinted at me like she was doing math. "How old are you?" she asked. "Old enough to stop hoping," I said, quieter than I meant to. She snorted. "Bullshit. Hope don't expire. Just gets quieter when folks stop listening to it." I blinked, caught between laughing and crying. She reached under the counter, pulled out 2 mismatched plates, and started cutting the pie. No one should go without something sweet on their day, even if the rest of the world's too blind to notice. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My throat tightened too fast. I busied myself with napkins, tried to breathe past whatever was building in my chest. We ate in mostly silence. She talked about a shipment of used cookbooks that came in water-damaged and smelling like mildew. I nodded when I could, grateful for the distraction. Then my phone buzzed. One new message. From Travis. It was a photo. The whole family, my family, gathered around a long dinner table. Laughter frozen mid-frame, plates full, glasses raised. My mother was smiling, wearing the green sweater she used to reserve for Easter. The caption underneath read, "One less mouth to feed." I stared at it, the smiley face a gut punch. They remembered. Just not to celebrate, to mock. That's what I was to them. Not a son, not a brother, just a problem that had finally solved itself. I deleted the photo. Didn't save it. Didn't reply. Just deleted it like they'd done with me. I cleaned up the pie dishes, put the extra slices in the little back fridge. Then I found myself reaching for the sketch pad I kept buried at the bottom of the drawer behind the register. The one I hadn't touched in years. Not since college. Not since Dad told me design was a soft skill for soft men. I flipped it open and let my pencil move. A table, solid, heavy-legged, made from reclaimed pine. Then a chair, wide-backed with cross-bracing. A bench, a bookshelf. My hand didn't shake. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one to criticize the lines or call it a waste of time. I sketched until my fingers cramped and the store went quiet again. I didn't even hear Nora leave. At closing, I tucked the page beneath the counter, unsure what to do with it. Leaving it there felt like a risk, like inviting someone to see something I wasn't ready to explain. But I left it anyway. Maybe because a small part of me wanted it to be seen. That night, back in my room, I found something new in my jacket pocket. A key on a ring, plain brass with a tag tied by twine. The tag read, "For the first place you don't have to earn." No signature. But I knew who it was from. I held it in my hand for a long time, listening to the floorboards settle and the world outside grow still. The next morning I opened the shop early. The sketch was gone. In its place was a note, scribbled on the back of a lumber invoice. "Come see me at the lumber yard, Tyler." That was all. Just a name I didn't know. But something inside me, something buried beneath years of being forgotten, stirred like a match catching on dry kindling. The lumberyard smelled like cedar and ash, raw and grounded, like the past and future burning in the same fire. I stood at the edge of the open bay, unsure whether to knock or just walk in. My heart thudded in my chest harder than I liked. It wasn't fear, not quite. It was the feeling you get when you are about to return to something that once meant everything, and got taken from you. Tyler McRae stepped out from behind a stacked pallet of timber. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with sun-browned arms and that easy posture you only earn from years of lifting heavy things without making a show of it. A pencil was tucked behind one ear, and his shirt had more sawdust than cotton left. "You Nate?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." He grinned. "Guy who stole your sketch." He waved toward a work table where my design, creased, slightly smudged, was pinned under a tape measure and a coffee mug. "You draw like a guy who's been silenced," he said. I shrugged. My family said I wasted time making lines instead of cutting wood. He walked over to a stack of fresh oak planks, ran a hand across the top like someone greeting an old friend. "Well, let's show them what wasted time looks like in oak." He tossed me a pair of safety goggles and nodded toward the saw. I stared at the plank in front of me. Rough edges, imperfect grain, but steady. I picked up a square to mark the cut. My hands hesitated, then found rhythm. The saw roared to life, and the blade screamed through the wood. It should have just been noise, but it was music, a low chord that buzzed through bone and breath. I cut once, then again. Precise. Measured. Tears burned the corners of my eyes before I even noticed them. I kept cutting. That sound, it was memory and defiance wrapped in wood grain. The echo of late nights in my grandfather's shed, his old hands steadying mine. I hadn't realized how much I missed it. The feel of real work. Not performance, not pleasing anyone, just doing. Tyler was watching. He didn't interrupt. Just nodded when I shut off the saw and stood there, heart racing, breath shaky. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, wiping my face with the back of my arm. "More than okay." He smiled. "We've got 4 weeks till the fall market. Think we can get this table done by then?" I looked down at the first cut. "Yeah," I said. "I think we can." We worked for hours, moving between saws and clamps and the constant hiss of the shop's space heater kicking on and off. He didn't hover, didn't correct. Just let me move. At one point, I reached into the tool chest for a hammer and froze. It was old, worn smooth by decades of use. The handle had faint initials carved into it. W-E-H, my grandfather's. I turned it in my hand, stunned. Tyler noticed. "That one came in a box from an estate clean-out a few years ago. No one claimed it." I didn't answer, just held it like it had weight beyond its metal and wood. He didn't press. We got the table frame roughed out by early afternoon. It wasn't perfect. One leg sat uneven, and we'd need to rework the joinery. But it was real. Mine. "New route," I muttered, mostly to myself. Tyler looked over. "What's that?" I shook my head. "Just something I think I'm building." He gave me a look that didn't ask for more, just nodded like he understood. As I swept the sawdust near the door, he pulled a business card from his wallet and tossed it onto the workbench. "You're coming with me to the craft fair," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "What makes you so sure?" "You didn't flinch when the blade hit the grain. That means something." I picked up the card. Heavy cardstock, simple lettering. McRae and Coert, handcrafted woodworks. A date and location were scrawled on the back. He clapped me once on the shoulder and headed to the office. I stayed a moment longer, letting the sawdust settle around my boots like snowfall. They said, "Let's see if he can." I can. I did. And for the first time, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me, and maybe for the man who believed in me before I ever touched a chisel, whose initials, carved into an old hammer, had waited all this time to be held again. The town square was already alive when I got there. Fox Hollow didn't do things big, but they did them honest. White tents lined the brick-paved paths like cotton sails in slow wind. Music spilled from a local band warming up near the gazebo, their chords imperfect but full of heart. Kids chased each other past booths with kettle corn, hand-knitted scarves, and wooden toys. And there I was, booth number 23, wedged between a candle vendor and someone selling antique soda bottles. Tyler had brought the banner, New Route in bold, brushed letters. He'd smiled like it meant nothing, but I saw the care he'd put into the lettering. I saw the way he'd left my name off deliberately, not to erase it, but to let the work speak first. The table I'd made stood front and center, cedar and oak, strong lines, honest joinery. My heart beat faster than I liked. Every knock of a stroller wheel, every voice drifting too close. It all felt louder, closer. My palms itched. I'd spent years being told I had no business trying to make something of my own. And now, the thing I'd made was under the morning sun, open to every eye and opinion. "Breathe," Tyler said, passing me a thermos of coffee. "People can't unsee good work. Let 'em come." And they did. First a couple who ran their fingers over the tabletop like they were checking for ghosts. Then a man who asked what kind of sealant we used. And then, just after noon, a woman in her late 40s, with silver-streaked braids and a university sweatshirt, stopped in front of the table and didn't move. She touched the edge like she was reading it in Braille. "You made this?" she asked, not looking up. "Mostly," I said, "with borrowed tools and borrowed faith. She finally met my eyes. Looks like it was worth the loan. She walked around the piece, nodding slightly. I teach art history, she said. We spend a lot of time talking about function and form, but this has something else. A heart line. I didn't respond, just waited. How much? The price is marked, I said, pointing to the small card tucked under the vase of dried flowers. She pulled out her phone. I'll pay double. I blinked. Sorry? She smiled. I see the heart in it. I want to pay what it's worth to me, not what you think it's worth to you. My hands shook as I wrapped the table in felt blankets. She handed me a small envelope before she left. Not all families are blood, she said. Some are built plank by plank. When she disappeared into the crowd, I let myself breathe again. I opened the envelope later, just a note inside. The same words she'd said, written in looping cursive. A few minutes after she left, 3 more people stopped by asking about custom pieces. Tyler kept grinning, like he knew this would happen all along. Told you, he said, slapping my back. Roots grow faster in the right soil. By late afternoon, the booth was half empty. Not because we didn't bring enough, but because people had taken what I made home with them. My work was out there now, in kitchens, in sunrooms, in lives that didn't know my past, and didn't care. I sat on the curb when the music faded and the tents began to close. The thermos was empty, and the sky had turned the soft orange of early fall. I watched a kid spin in circles until he fell, laughing. They left me with nothing but silence. I turned it into form and function. And maybe hope. Later that night, back in my room above the bookstore, I pulled off my boots and let my back sink into the mattress. Every muscle ached. Not from shame or tension, but from effort, from doing. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Message request from Dylan. The name hit harder than expected. I hesitated before opening it. Heard about your booth. Dad's not happy. Call me. No hello, no congratulations. Just trouble brewing in the background again. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I walked downstairs, past the sleeping bookstore, and turned on the light in the back room. The same one Nora had cleaned out for me last week, saying it was time I had a workspace of my own. I picked up a pencil, and I started sketching something bigger. The message sat on my screen like it had weight. Heard about your booth. Dad's not happy. Call me. Dylan's name hadn't passed my lips in weeks, but it echoed sometimes, at night, in the quiet between pages of bookkeeping or the hum of sawdust in the air. The voice that used to tease, then judge, then disappear. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I tapped call. He picked up on the second ring. You sound taller, he said. I didn't reply. Silence stretched for a beat too long. Then, you proved your point. I leaned against the window, watching rain collect on the bookstore awning. It wasn't about a point, I said. It was about surviving what you all called love. He exhaled, a soft hiss, like he was trying not to say what he really wanted to. Dad's not well, he said. Not dying, but slower. Confused. You know how he gets when he feels weak. Everything gets sharper. Meaner. That sounds familiar? Nate, come on. I waited. The old man wants to get some paperwork sorted. Property, maybe inheritance. You're still listed on things. You need to come back. Sign a few things. Why now? I asked. He heard about the craft fair. One of Mom's church friends saw a photo online. You with a table, smiling like a man who got free. I didn't answer. Dylan filled the silence. You think this is about dragging you back in? It's just paper. Legal stuff. That legal stuff has barbed wire around it, I said. I'm not stepping over that fence again. He went quiet. You always did know how to make things complicated, he said. No, I said. I just finally learned to stop pretending they weren't. Another pause. Then he tried a different angle. You're really staying there? In Fox something? Fox Hollow. Jesus. It's not a prison, Dylan. Doesn't sound like home either. No, I said, and let the words settle. It doesn't. That's why it works. He sighed again, softer this time. I get it, he said. I really do. I don't need you to get it, I said. I just need you to stop pulling at the threads when I'm finally warm. The line went silent. Then, Mom's gonna call. She can leave a message. She will. We hung up without goodbye. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand, the rain ticking like nails on glass. He wanted the old Nate, the one who stayed quiet, kept the peace, took the blame. That version of me burned the day they left me at a rest stop and drove off like I was luggage they couldn't justify carrying. I didn't hate them. Not anymore. I just stopped auditioning for the part of good son. Later that afternoon, I walked to Bellamy Books. Nora was upstairs napping. I went to the back, where my newest piece waited, half-finished, raw in places, sturdy in others. I pulled out the small brass plaque Tyler had given me the day before. Let's see if he can... I added the rest myself, carefully engraving with the wood-burning pen. And he did. It wasn't about pride. It was about fact, about not erasing the path just because it was painful. That night, as I closed up the shop, the bell over the door jingled. Nobody was there, just the wind. But my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Voicemail, one new message from Mom. I let it play on speaker. Her voice was slower than I remembered, like she'd aged in weeks instead of years. Nathan, you need to come back. There are things you don't understand. Things your father didn't tell you. You were never meant to be left behind that day. That wasn't the plan. Please, come home. The message ended. No details, no apology. Just implication. I stared at the phone a long time before locking up. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking leaves loose like memories too old to hold on. But I didn't feel guilt. Only clarity. A boundary drawn in hardwood. The road out to the old cabin hadn't changed much. Still narrow, still dust-covered. The kind of road that always seemed to be leading somewhere forgotten. Pines leaned in from either side, branches overhead like fingers trying to block out the sky. I drove slow, letting the tires crunch gravel and memory beneath me. I hadn't planned this, wasn't even sure why I turned the key and started driving after hearing her voice. Maybe it was her tone. Maybe it was the silence that followed her message. Like something unsaid was louder than what made it through. The cabin sat just where I remembered, half swallowed by moss and time. The front steps sagged, and the screen door hung off one hinge. But the bones were there. Just like me, it had survived by leaning into its own quiet. Inside, the smell hit first, cedar, dust, and the faint trace of oil from old tools long unused. Light filtered through a cracked window. It cast sharp angles on the floorboards, like everything here refused to be soft anymore. I stepped inside. It wasn't a house. It was a memory, framed in pine and shadow. The workbench in the corner still held my grandfather's tools, rusted now, but carefully arranged, as if he'd only just walked away. There were wood shavings in the same corner I used to play in, sitting cross-legged with scraps while the grown-ups drank silence like whiskey. And then I saw it, tucked under the bench, where I'd hidden it once out of shame, a model cabin I'd built at 13. Tiny windows, uneven roof, furniture carved from popsicle sticks. It was crooked, ridiculous, but it had taken me weeks. They laughed at it back then, called it a dollhouse, My father held it up like a joke. My brother snapped one of the railings with 2 fingers and a grin. But I'd built it. And now, all these years later, here it still sat. They laughed at it, I whispered, brushing the dust away. Called it a dollhouse, but it was mine. I set it down carefully on the bench, heart tightening. My grandfather had seen it too. Maybe he hadn't said anything. Maybe he didn't have the words. But then I opened the bottom drawer of the old dresser in the corner and found something folded beneath a cracked photo frame. An envelope, yellowed, sealed. My name written on the front in my grandfather's handwriting. Nathan. Not Nate, not son. Just Nathan. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just held it. He saw me, even when my parents didn't. He left me something. Not money, not instructions. A memory. And memory builds stronger than brick. Before I left, I walked out to the back porch. The bench was still there, carved with initials long faded by rain. Near the edge, in fresh marks I somehow missed before, someone had added, "You are not the pieces they left behind. You are the whole they couldn't carry." I stood there longer than I meant to, the envelope in one hand, the air thick with pine and old summers. Then I drove back to Fox Hollow. Not fast, but not hesitating either. When I walked into Bellamy Books, the bell above the door chimed. Familiar now, comforting in a way no family hallway ever was. Nora was behind the counter, sorting a stack of used novels that smelled like other people's lives. But I didn't see her first. I saw Laura, the professor from the craft fair, the one who bought my first table. She stood near the front, holding a canvas messenger bag and a folder thick with papers. When she saw me, she smiled. "I was hoping you'd show up today," she said. "I've got an offer. Part-time design teaching at the university. Nothing fancy, just hands-on work, real-world building. Thought it might suit you." I didn't speak. Couldn't, not yet. Somewhere in my coat pocket, the envelope still pressed warm against my ribs. But I nodded. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't asking for what I had left. They were offering something for who I already was. I waited until the store was quiet. The late afternoon sun poured through the front windows of Bellamy Books, turning the dust in the air to gold. Nora moved slowly behind the counter, brewing tea like it was a kind of prayer. Quiet, deliberate, sacred. I sat at the corner table with the envelope in front of me. My name, Nathan, faded but clear, the handwriting slanted and careful. I'd found it in a drawer of a cabin no one visited anymore, tucked beneath a cracked photo frame and a world of silence. Now it sat between my hands, warm from my hesitation. I opened it with the slow precision of someone afraid of what they might not find. The paper was thick. Real stationery, not a napkin or the back of a receipt. My grandfather hadn't rushed this. "If you're reading this, it means you were brave enough to come back, not to them, but to yourself." I felt my throat tighten. I left that cabin long ago, but not because I wanted to. I was told I didn't belong, told I was wasting time carving instead of conforming. But Wood listened to me when people didn't. The words landed like soft hammers, gentle but shaping something. "You came from silence, same as me. But I hope you found noise worth keeping. Music, laughter, your own damn name." I didn't notice Nora sit across from me until she slid a mug toward my elbow. The steam curled like breath on a cold day. She nodded toward the letter. "He wrote like someone who believed you'd come back for that," she said. "Or maybe," I said, voice rough, "he knew I'd be pushed far enough to look for it." She smiled softly, eyes knowing. "Then let me finish alone." The letter went on. There's land in your name, just outside Fox Hollow. I bought it years ago, never built on it. Thought maybe one day you'd want to carve something of your own, far from the noise that told you not to. I froze. My name. On land. I turned the page and found the deed folded neatly behind the letter. Signed, notarized, even dated. Years before my family left me on the side of a highway. He'd seen a future in me before I did. Maybe that's all any of us need. One person who doesn't laugh when we say we can. The last part wasn't typed. It was handwritten in pencil, slanted and rushed. Let's see if he can. I know he will. I folded everything back with care and stood. Outside, the day had turned golden. I walked. Past the bookstore. Past the cafe with the chipped red chairs. Past the park where dogs ran freely and no one watched the clock. I kept walking until the pavement ended and gravel picked up. The land wasn't big. Just a few acres nestled at the edge of Fox Hollow, with tall trees like sentinels and soft hills that caught the light like velvet. But it was mine. And I could already see it. Sketches rising in my head like they'd been waiting for permission. A workshop with windows wide enough to let the wind in. A porch for watching storms roll through. Maybe, someday, a place for others like me. The ones who weren't built to fit, but to build. I stood at the edge of the clearing, letting it wash over me. The quiet, the possibility, the gift of something earned but never asked for. Then my phone buzzed. 1. New email. Calloway family estate dispute. Urgent mediation required. I stared at the subject line, cold spreading through my chest like smoke under a door. Of course they weren't done. Of course peace wasn't free. But now I wasn't standing on their porch. I was standing on mine. I didn't open the email. I didn't need to. Not yet. Behind me, a branch cracked gently in the breeze. The pines whispered like old men trading secrets. I turned and headed back toward town. The letter tucked safe in my jacket pocket. A weight I no longer feared. I knew who I was walking back to. And for once, it wasn't them. The law office smelled like money pretending to be manners. Polished leather, old wood, a tray of bottled water no one touched. The receptionist smiled too much. The silence was padded, like everything here was designed to hush the truth. I sat across from them. Mother, spine ramrod straight in a cream blazer. Dylan, already fiddling with a pen like he wanted to escape into its click. And Travis, leaning back with that same look he wore at every childhood birthday he ruined. The lawyer, a gray-haired man with a voice like unbuttered toast, cleared his throat. As outlined, the Calloway estate is being divided among the surviving children and spouse. However, Mrs. Calloway has raised a concern regarding Mr. Nathan Calloway's claim. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Nathan has voluntarily abandoned his family obligations, she said. We believe that legally disqualifies him from his portion. I took a slow breath and said nothing. Dylan finally looked up. You chose to leave, Nate? No, I said, meeting his eyes. You left me. At a gas station, with no call, no note, just fast food wrappers in the wind. Mother stiffened. Dylan opened his mouth, then shut it. Travis smirked. We thought you'd come back humbled. I came back whole, I said. That's the problem, isn't it? The room fell quiet. The lawyer cleared his throat again, clearly regretting every life decision that brought him to this family drama. There is an offer, he said, motioning to the folder in front of him. A cash settlement, waiver of future claims, clean and simple. I glanced at the folder, then pushed it back. I'm not here for the money, I said. Mother scoffed. Then why are you here? I stood. I wanted you to see me. I paused. But now I just need you to see me leave. Their faces didn't move, but something in the air shifted, control slipping, old roles cracking. I turned and walked toward the door. No speeches, no thunder, just quiet, steady footsteps down the hallway of a building where they thought they could write me off like an unpaid bill. On my way out, I passed Travis. He didn't move aside. As I brushed past, he muttered, "Still soft." I kept walking. Because softness didn't mean weakness. Softness meant knowing how not to become them. Near the exit, a young woman at the reception desk caught my arm. Not rudely, just gently. She slipped me a folded note. Didn't say a word. Outside, the light was sharper, less forgiving. I unfolded the paper. "You were the only one who didn't raise your voice. That says more than they'll ever know." I stood there on the stone steps, letting that land. No one clapped, no one cried, but dignity has a sound too. It's just quieter. Across the parking lot, a car door opened. Laura. She stepped out, wearing jeans, boots, and a bag full of rolled papers. "You said," she called, "you wanted to build something real, didn't you?" I walked toward her. She handed me the blueprints, half-drawn sketches, wide windows, deep shelves. "A place to teach, design, maybe even carve," she said. I thought maybe you'd want to start now. My hands trembled, but not from anger, from something else entirely. A quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, this time I was walking into something that didn't ask me to shrink. The blueprints barely fit on the diner table. Laura had to move the ketchup and sugar caddy just to get the corners to lay flat. Sawdust still clung to my sleeves. I hadn't changed since the shop that morning, but something in me already felt different. Like I was wearing something new under the layers, something invisible and solid, like belief. Laura tapped the corner of the page. "This," she said, "isn't just a workshop." "It looks like one," I said, squinting at the sketched beams and windows. "It's more," she said. "You build this, and you invite people in. Kids, teens, people like you were. Give them tools, a space to build, a place to be." I looked up. Her eyes didn't waver. "What your family did," she continued. "That doesn't define your name. What you do next does." I ran a thumb over the blueprint. The edge of the wood table underneath caught a splinter in my skin. It didn't hurt. "I'm not trying to carry a legacy," I said. "I'm trying to build one." And just like that, the decision settled. Not in a flash of anger or grand rebellion, but like setting down a bag I'd carried too long. That afternoon, I stood in line at the courthouse. The form was simple. Name change request, reason, personal identity realignment. A fancy way to say I want to stop being a Calloway. At the bottom, I printed it clearly. Nathan Root. Root. Not because it sounded poetic, but because it was. Deep, grounded, chosen. My grandfather carved with root tools, called his first table line Rooted Goods. It was right there all along. They gave me a name soaked in silence. I'd turn it into one that spoke for itself. That night, I posted a photo on the shop page Tyler helped me set up. The caption read, "New name, new wood, new roots. Launching a youth design program at our workshop this winter, for anyone who ever felt like they were building alone." The photo. A beam of pine, etched with the new brand. Root, burned in by hand. I didn't expect much, maybe a few likes from folks in Fox Hollow. A comment from Tyler. Maybe Nora if she figured out how to log in. But by midnight, it had over 800 shares. By morning, 3,000. Messages flooded in, some from strangers across the country. My dad called me soft, too. Still hear it in my head sometimes. I left at 19, slept in my car. Now I'm a welder in Montana. Respect to you. Following from my son. He carves to survive school. I scrolled through them in silence, thumb trembling. All those people, all that noise, but not the kind that silenced, it amplified. By mid-morning, Laura brought in a carved box, dark walnut, smooth, simple. I opened it. Inside, a mirror, small, circular, set into cedar. She said, "So you don't forget what strength looks like." I couldn't speak, only nodded, eyes burning. That afternoon, I returned to Bellamy Books, needing the quiet. Nora gave me a look like she already knew something had changed. Didn't ask, just handed me a lemon muffin and waved toward the back. As I reached the counter, I noticed a small white envelope, addressed to Nathan Root in looping script I knew too well. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Just a few words, written in careful, deliberate strokes. "You've changed. I want to see what you're building. Mom." I folded the note, slipped it into the carved mirror box. Then I looked at myself, not just reflected, but seen. For the first time, not by her, by me, the town hall never looked this full, and I never expected to care. Strings of warm lights hung above reclaimed wood displays, each piece stained in tones of maple and memory. The banner over the front doors read, "New Root, Stories in Wood." Inside, the scent of sawdust still clung faintly to the tables, woven with lemon oil and sugar. Nora had brought cookies shaped like tiny hammers. Tyler handled the name tags with surprising precision, and Jed wore flannel that looked like it had been ironed, though I doubted it. Someone from the local paper crouched to photograph one of the benches. A couple of college kids took selfies near the rocking chair. I caught a little girl pressing her cheek to the grain of a coffee table. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't standing in the corner of my own moment. Then I saw her, near the entryway, hair pulled tight, lips pressed even tighter. My mother. She didn't step forward. She just stood there, eyes skimming the crowd, then stopping on me. I turned back to the display. Let her find her own footing. A few minutes later, I felt her beside me, hovering, not imposing, like a woman not sure if she was entering a gallery or a courtroom. She spoke first. "You've built something," she said softly. "I didn't know you could." I didn't look at her, just stared at the final piece, a long bench carved from pine and ash, its legs joined with pegs, no nails. "That was the problem, wasn't it?" I said. "You never wanted to know." She exhaled, and it cracked a little on the way out. I thought I was helping," she said, "toughening you. But it was never about you, was it? It was about how we looked, what we kept hidden." Her voice faltered. "I was wrong. We were wrong. You were never the failure." I turned to her then, not to argue, not to collapse, just to see. And there it was, behind the face I'd tried to escape for so long. Something soft, real, maybe too late, but real. I nodded. "Thank you." That's all I said. Not because I didn't have more, but because forgiveness tonight wasn't about reunion. It was about release. She didn't hug me, didn't ask for a second chance. Just stood there, holding silence like it might fall apart if she moved. Then she turned and left, quiet as she came. The night rolled on. Voices blurred into background hum. Laughter, glass clinks, a boy dragging a stool across the floor. Nora handed out her 6th batch of cookies like a woman running for mayor. And I stood beside the final piece, the one I nearly didn't finish. Beneath it, the nameplate read, "Let's see if he can." He did, and now he teaches others too. I traced the edge of the plate with my finger, feeling the groove of each letter. Someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned. A teenager, maybe 16, stood there. Messy hair, hoodie too big, ink-stained fingers. He looked down at the table, then back at me. "Do you teach?" I smiled. Maybe not wide, but real. "Yeah," I said. "I do." "Do you teach?" The voice was thin but steady. I turned. A kid, 15 maybe, skinny, hoodie too big, sleeves frayed from being chewed or worried over. His eyes didn't meet mine right away. But when they did, I saw something bruised behind them. Hope, maybe? Or the memory of it. He cleared his throat. "I saw your stuff. The table. And the stool with the burned edges." "That one nearly broke my sander," I said, smiling. "Did it speak to you or just offend your taste?" He snorted. "I liked the cracks. They looked like mine." Name was Jesse. Foster care since 12, temporary placements, permanent losses. He'd come with a mentor from the county program, but had wandered off toward the sawdust-smelling corners of the exhibit, then toward me. Laura appeared with timing so perfect I was starting to think she could read thoughts. "We applied for a community grant," she said, eyes on Jesse. "It's called Rootworks, weekend sessions in the workshop. You teach, we document, the kids learn, and maybe unlearn." Jesse shifted. "They say I'm too angry," he mumbled. "Anger's just loud grief," I said. "Wood doesn't care if your hands shake, it just waits." Saturday came like a slow sunrise. The shop smelled like cedar and faint old coffee. Jesse stood near the workbench, unsure whether to touch anything. I handed him something wrapped in a cloth. He unrolled it slowly. A carving knife. The first one I ever used. Old, worn, sharp in the right places. "This used to feel useless," I said. "So did I." He turned it in his hand like it was breakable, then looked at me and nodded. The first cut was shaky, the second a little more confident. By the third, he didn't flinch when the blade met the wood. I watched in silence. "I don't know what I'm making," he said. "That's fine," I said. "Neither did I, but I kept carving. Turns out the shape finds you eventually." He smirked. "Sounds fake." "Maybe," I said. But so did healing. At lunch, we sat on the back steps of the shop, peanut butter sandwiches in hand. Laura leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes proud. "This," she said softly. "This is how you break the cycle." Jesse didn't respond, but I saw him pocket the cloth from the knife like it was gold. By the time dusk settled over Fox Hollow, Jesse had started building a small stool. 4 legs, crooked, splinters everywhere. But on the underside, he etched something with a nail. J. Still standing. Later that night, I returned to the apartment above Bellamy Books. The window was open, air crisp. I brewed tea like Nora taught me. 3 minutes, no more, no less, and sat at the desk where I used to trace table designs that no one would ever see. My inbox blinked. From Dylan subject, Dad. "He's in the hospital, asked for you." That was it. No apology, no details, just a brittle sentence floating in digital space. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I opened the wooden box my grandfather left me. Beneath the tools and the deed papers, there was a folded note I hadn't touched in weeks. I opened it. His handwriting. Crooked, precise. "Strength doesn't always resist. Sometimes it returns." I stared out the window. The street below was quiet. But somewhere in the darkness, I knew Jesse was sanding his stool. And I knew, without doubt, the cycle had cracked. The smell of hospital antiseptic hit me before I even pushed open the door. Room 217. I hadn't said that number out loud since the call came in, but it had repeated itself in my mind like an echo I couldn't quiet. He looked smaller. My father, once all thunder and door-slamming fury, now lay propped against white pillows, swallowed by a hospital gown and a tangle of thin wires. His hair, once thick and harsh like his words, had turned more gray than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just never noticed. He looked up. Didn't smile, didn't frown. Just blinked. "You came?" he said, voice paper-thin. "I did," I replied, standing at the foot of his bed like a boy again. The room hummed with machines, a slow beeping rhythm, like a broken metronome trying to hold time that no longer wanted to be kept. We sat in that stiff silence for a long moment. Finally he spoke. "You always had that softness," he said, not unkindly. "I didn't know what to do with it." I looked at him, really looked at him. Pale, fragile, not weak, but close. "You didn't have to do anything," I said. "Just not weaponize it." He shifted, wincing as he tried to sit straighter. "We come from people who believed boys were built, not raised. I tried to build you strong." "No," I said. "You built walls. Around me, around yourself. Strong has room to bend." He let out something between a sigh and a cough. I was angry at myself, for being afraid, for not knowing how to love someone like you. That hit harder than I expected. A nurse peeked in, nodded politely, and placed a paper bag on the side table. "His things," she whispered. My father barely noticed. "I'm sorry," he muttered, almost inaudible. His eyes watered, but not enough to fall. I nodded, but said nothing. And it was the first silence between us that didn't feel like punishment. I stood. No final words. No movie-ending monologue. Just a look. Not quite forgiveness, but not rage either. I left him there, in that sterile room, beneath the dull buzz of fluorescent lights and time running shorter. The automatic doors slid open, spilling me into late afternoon haze. I inhaled, sharp, fresh, not lighter, not heavier either. A chapter had closed, not sealed, but folded gently shut. On the curb near the parking lot sat Jesse. His hoodie looked even bigger today. In his lap, the half-built stool, one leg still unshaped. "I figured you might need to sit for a minute," he said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was perfect. I sat. The stool creaked. It held. "I saw you," Jesse said quietly. "Talking to him." "I didn't talk much." He nodded. "Sometimes that says more." We sat there in companionable quiet. Two people who used to be invisible, now just present. I reached into the paper bag the nurse had given me. Inside, his wallet, a folded flannel, and a torn sheet of yellowed paper. I unfolded it carefully. A sketch. Crude, childlike. A table with uneven legs and a crooked heart drawn in the center. My name was scrawled at the bottom, Nate, with backwards E. He had kept it, all these years. The wind picked up, rustling Jesse's hoodie and carrying the scent of distant pine. "You ready to finish that leg?" I asked, nodding at the stool. Jesse looked down. Then up. "I think I am." And I thought maybe, just maybe, I was too. The scent of pine and fresh-cut oak filled the air, warm, grounding, like a familiar voice you hadn't heard in years but recognized instantly. I stood just outside the new Rootworks workshop, sunlight cutting through the open bay doors. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze, a strip of red against the golden grain of the sign overhead. The words had been etched into reclaimed wood. Rootworks, made by hand, grown by heart. People had gathered, neighbors, kids, reporters with notepads they barely pretended to use. I spotted Jed in a wrinkled button-down. Nora had brought lemon bars. Again. Tyler leaned on a stack of donated lumber. Even Laura, ever composed, looked a little misty-eyed. A life ago, this many eyes would have made me bolt. Today, I only smoothed my shirt. Nora sidled up beside me, eyeing the crowd. "I knew you had it in you," she said, soft but sure. I let the words settle. That's what the world needs. People who say that, even when we don't believe it yet. She gave my arm a squeeze. Don't forget to breathe up there. Too late. A local official cleared his throat at the mic. Something about grants and youth outreach, the value of trades, the healing power of sawdust. I caught only every other word. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward. Note cards in my hand, heart in my throat. Good afternoon, I started. My name is Nate. A gust of wind knocked the cards from my grip. I stared at them on the ground, then laughed. It started quiet, then honest. A ripple from somewhere deep. I looked up at everyone, eyes searching and steady. I had something written, clever lines, rehearsed thanks. But healing doesn't follow a script. You just tell the truth, and you let it sit in the air. I paused. People leaned in, not out. I didn't build this place because I had a plan. I built it because I needed to believe that broken things could still hold weight, that something made in silence could speak anyway. Nods. Tears in a few eyes I didn't expect. I breathed in pine and courage. My family once asked, let's see if he can. I smiled. Turns out I could, and I did. And now I get to help others do it too. Applause broke out, not polite, but full-bodied, the kind that fills a rib cage. Jesse stepped forward, cheeks flushed. He carried a bench, his first full piece, solid, smooth edges, back rail slightly crooked, etched into the seat in his careful, uneven script, built from silence, meant to be heard. I nodded at him. He nodded back. There was pride in his stance. And wait. The good kind. As the crowd began to mingle, I stepped back to take it in. Laura handed out flyers. Jed told a kid how to hammer without breaking a thumb. Tyler talked commissions. This place was real. Not a dream. Not a maybe. Then I saw him. Travis, off to the side, clean shirt, no expression, just a presence. He didn't approach, didn't wave, but he nodded. Just once. And then disappeared into the crowd. That was enough. Later, after the lemonade was poured and the cameras put away, I walked back inside. The bench sat beneath the back window, sunlight stretching across its slats. I bent down and ran my fingers underneath. A small brass plate had been affixed there. It read, "Let's see if he can." I touched the words, then stood tall. Because I had. And I would. The leaves had begun to turn, again. Golds and rusts fluttered around my boots as I walked the woods behind the workshop, hands tucked deep in my jacket pockets, breath visible in the crisp air. It had been a year since the SUV pulled away. A year since the silence swallowed me whole on that Tennessee roadside. And somehow I was still here. Not just breathing, but living. The trees swayed gently, whispering through their branches like they knew something I didn't. Or maybe they were just nodding in quiet agreement. I paused near a clearing where we'd stacked split logs for winter. Jesse had lined them with such precision, you'd think symmetry cured loneliness. Maybe, in a way, it did. The crunch of leaves behind me broke the quiet. Laura stepped beside me, holding 2 mugs. "Cider," she said, handing me one. I took a sip. Still too hot. Still perfect. We stood there a minute, letting the stillness do what words couldn't. Then she asked, softly, "Think you'll ever forgive them?" I didn't hesitate. I already did, just didn't send the memo. Later that morning, the kids gathered around the porch, Jesse grinning like he'd swallowed a whole secret. He handed me a square of wood, freshly lacquered, corners sanded smooth. On it, the words, "Let's see if he can." And below, in thick, uneven letters, half carved, half burned, "He did. Now we can too." I stared at it, said nothing. because nothing needed to be said. I leaned the plaque against the porch railing, the sun warming its grain. Then I sat down with my coffee, the mug nestled between my palms. Jesse swept sawdust from the workbench nearby, humming something tuneless. I watched the rhythm of his movements, the way he'd started to stand straighter, how his shoulders no longer curled inward like apology. We'd built this, together, board by board, without needing anyone's permission. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the old folded note, the one that started it all. Let's see if he can... The paper was soft at the folds now, the ink a little faded, but the weight of it hadn't changed. I flipped it over. In my own handwriting, added months ago when no one was looking. He did. Quietly. Fully. A buzz from the phone in my coat pocket interrupted the silence. I checked the screen. Bellamy Books. The message was short. We're expanding our mentorship series. Interested in co-authoring something on healing through craft? Your story matters. Let's give it voice. I let the screen dim in my hand. Didn't reply right away. Just smiled. Because somehow this life, quiet, honest, stitched together from broken planks and bent nails, had started speaking for itself. The wind kicked up again. I looked at the plaque one more time, then leaned back in the chair, watching the last leaves fall. Not everything has to end in noise. Some victories arrive just like this. Warm mug, autumn air, a boy humming at the bench you built together. And peace, finally earned. Sometimes the family we're born into can wound us in ways that linger. But healing doesn't always mean confrontation. It often starts with creating something of your own, no matter how small. Whether it's a wooden stool, a quiet home, or a kind word to someone younger, what we build matters more than what we were denied. And peace? It's not given. It's made, board by board. If this story brought you comfort or reminded you of your own journey, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. We share heartfelt stories about family, forgiveness, and finding peace. Explore more. There's one waiting just for you.